Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Rupa Subramanya Show. Now, very early in spring of 2020, an orthodox narrative around COVID 19 took hold. Basically, COVID 19 was going to be extremely lethal. We were all going to die from it if we didn't implement harsh measures like lockdowns and school closures and mask mandates that eventually were implemented along with vaccine mandates. No dissension was allowed, and scientists and medical professionals who challenged this official narrative were hounded and canceled. I've spoken to various scientists on this show who were hounded and canceled for having a different perspective on the pandemic, a different scientific perspective on the pandemic. And today I speak to Simon Goddek, a scientist who was fired from various positions at universities in Europe for publishing an academic paper on vitamin D that talked about how vitamin D could potentially treat COVID 19. He sent out some tweets challenging this official narrative that the sky was falling, and as a result, his whole life was turned upside down by doing that. It's my great pleasure to speak to Simon today about what happened to him and where things stand now. Hey, Simon, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. I want to just ask you to explain to us all of the things that happened to you over the course of the pandemic that resulted in you being suspended from Twitter and eventually getting fired from your position at your university.
Oh yeah, it wasn't just one position. It were like three positions.
Yeah.
um, yeah, well, I don't know where to start. Maybe in the beginning.
Start from the beginning. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I was a scientist at Wageningen University. I think it's one of the top three universities in the world in biotech, and my background is biotech. I have a PhD in biotech, and I was very successful as a young scientist. I'm still young. I'm still in mid-30s, and right after I did my PhD, I was focusing on building bioreactors, on being in the lab, on publishing, on doing whatever is possible in order to get to a higher level as well, just to become an associate professor and then a full professor. It's like, the tenure track you usually use. So that's what I've been doing, and I got good citations, several hundred per year, and everything was going as planned or as I imagined until COVID hit, until they said like, oh, there is a deadly virus. I'm like, what? Like what? Especially as as I also publish in the human metabolism or metabolism in general, be it like animals or humans, mammals. And I was having quite some publications ready for vitamin D. And I was wondering, I think it was in March, April, May 2020, why are they not talking about vitamin D? Everybody has like sufficient levels, doesn't get ill. So in general, usually doesn't get ill. We can't generalize, but usually the likelihood is like close to zero to get ill if you have adequate levels. But they just wouldn't talk about this. So I was writing publication, publishing it in a good journal, in a high-ranked journal, Q1 journal, and it got published, and then I got into trouble. So the first people were sending emails to my former university, former employer, Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and they were like confronting me, like, "Hey, why did you publish this?" Like, I was like, "What?" it's a publication showing the solution, or a possible solution.
Hold on a second. So this is a peer-reviewed journal. So you're not publishing
Paper.
it. It's not like
paper.
In a paper in a peer-reviewed journal, right?
It's a journal that peer reviews, 3 external peer reviewers that agreed with the content of my paper. Yes, definitely.
Okay, so if I've understood this correctly, they're objecting to a paper being published in a peer-reviewed journal that's been peer-reviewed by your peers, and it's a scientific paper. You're a scientist, and go on.
Yeah. So the university got emails from people that are in the skeptic movement. I don't know if you're familiar with the skeptic movement. It's, let's say, I call them a sect. So everything which is not in line with what the government says, they're skeptic about. They're not skeptic about stuff in general. It's a sect. It's an evil sect. And their members were after me, sending emails like, okay, look, there's one of your scientists who is publishing dangerous pseudoscience, stuff like that. Must have been many emails. They were telling that I would sell vitamin D online, that I had my vitamin D business, and that consequently had conflicts of interest. Back then, I didn't have any vitamin D business. I mean, they gave me the idea to open one when I got fired third time. But I didn't have any. I didn't even think about selling vitamin D back then. It wouldn't even come to my mind, but they were just making it up.
Right.
And so on. So I got in trouble the first time at the university. Not really in trouble because I could explain, but it was like a process. I had to explain a lot why my stuff isn't pseudoscience. So I did this and things were fine again until I think I became active on Twitter end of December 2020. Before that, I wasn't really into social media. So I have my Instagram just for my friends, which I don't use. Once a month I look into there. Did someone send me a message back from school? I don't have Facebook. LinkedIn is dead. So I'm not a social media person. I mean, I talk to my friends, of course, on Telegram, whatever. But I mean, like, I don't like social media, or I didn't like social media. I started to like it now. So in December, I started calling out scientists who were like publishing vitamin D papers that were biased. So also people said like, oh, vitamin D is gonna cure everything. There was a scientist that said like levels above 35 nanograms per milliliter. Oh my gosh, nobody is gonna get to hospital and stuff. Was all made up data. So I was calling out them, even though they were on my side more or less, you know. But I was just looking into papers and I was trying to defend scientific integrity until a neighbor of mine in the Netherlands said like, Simon, do you want to look into what I found here? And I was like, what is it? He's like, the original PCR protocol, COVID protocol, published by Christian Drosten, seemed to have bypassed the peer review process. I was like, wow, that's unlikely. He was like, look into this. So I was looking into this because back then I was an editor of a journal. And as an editor, I'm very aware what the preview processes look like. Journal, it was an Elsevier journal, so top-notch journal. And I was just explaining in a Twitter thread. I think I had like 10, 20, 30 followers back then. So nothing, you know, like these small accounts, they're small. And NPC. I was an NPC.
Not very important people, really, with 20, 30 followers, but you have about 500,000 now, which is
yeah. I mean, but it started like that. It started that I wrote a thread explaining how a peer process works, why it takes several months in order to get your paper through peer process. So mine now, I have one on climate change. It's quite funny actually, but it's a critical one, but still, trying to stay within the narrative in order to be critical. I can talk about it later, or maybe not, but at least it's been in peer review for 1.5 years. You can imagine. So Drosten's paper was less than a day from submission till being online. So it's impossible. It's literally impossible. It's like, you know, you running against Usain Bolt 100 meters and you beat him by running in 5 seconds and he still needs 10 point something. Everyone would be like, this is impossible. And you would be like, come on, don't be a conspiracy theorist. and just come up with stupid arguments, you know? So I was publishing this thread, which was totally factual. And I was going to bed, and the next day I woke up in hatred. So I got many messages from virologists with, I thought they were huge accounts, they're like 5,000, 10,000. For me, these were huge accounts that were tagging me and the university and saying I would it would be a smear campaign against their colleague, and I'd be a pseudoscientist. And then I got in real trouble. So I had to talk to the dean about why I did this. And I was like, look, just look at my analysis. Is it correct? Like, he was looking into this. He was like, it's correct. What I said is factual. But why would I do this? Like, why would you? I'm like, come on, scientific fraud. I mean, I'm a scientist. Why should I accept this? Oh no, why can't you just be quiet? We're like, people were telling me, why can't you just be quiet? And there was no colleague who was totally like, Simon, we support you. I mean, like the university supported me publicly in a tweet. So like, Simon has his right for freedom of expression, but eventually, several weeks later, I was dismissed. Not publicly dismissed. They just didn't prolong my contract, even though I got my own follow-up funding. So they took the follow-up funding I got for them in my free time, which were millions. All right. Of the project were millions of dollars, and they just said like, no, you're too critical. We're gonna thank you for the money. We are gonna get an uncritical scientist with the money you got us. I was like, what the fuck? That was being cancelled big time. And I mean, the university is a very woke university. It's like their things, their topics are climate change and climate change and sustainability. So Agenda 2030, more or less, that's where they get the money from. But it's still, I mean, criticism wasn't really supported there, unfortunately.
So tell me something on vitamin D. That was the paper that you published in that journal. What made you? And I read somewhere that in early spring of 2020, you saw the news coming out of Bergamo, and you were also a little concerned about what was happening. And then what made you come up with the idea that vitamin D has the potential to treat COVID-19?
Oh, it's because I've been working on metabolism. So I make, you can just imagine the wall behind me with many factors, and I make causal loop diagrams. So I have these nerdy diagrams with interlinking factors, and it's actually it's a cause and effect graphic, which contains hundreds of thousands of factors. Okay. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing for several years. So I always knew that if getting sick is vitamin D deficiency in most of the cases. So I wrote the paper also, especially to tell people, hey, it's not just vitamin D. You need to take vitamin K2, and in order to make sure that the calcium is stored in your bones and teeth and not in your bloodstream, so you don't get liver stones. You literally avoid calcification, and that's why I wrote this paper, to make people aware of this fact and to make people aware. Look, if you don't want to get sick, just make sure your vitamin D levels are sufficient, because I refer to other publications that showed like that almost all people who died with COVID, I don't say due to COVID, because I think it's a comorbidity. COVID is the comorbidity. They died with a vitamin D deficiency, which means less than 10 nanograms per milliliter, and people who had higher levels usually didn't die. So I was just making people aware of this, and I thought it was the right thing to do back in the time, especially when they came up with the mask mandate. And be a biotechnician, I know that this mask doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't even work against dust in the lab. So how should it be able to
prevent a virus from?
Exactly. And we've always been told, don't wear a mask too long. You're like breeding your own fungi. It's dangerous. and suddenly they told everybody to, and I was like, okay, this can't be the solution. So I was just writing this paper. I had too much time. I think it was, we call them Pinkster. I think it's some Christian holiday, and it was a long weekend, and I was just using this weekend to write down this paper. I was just motivated for whatever reason, and if I hadn't done this, I would still have a good position now. But I mean, like, I'm glad I did anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you did. I mean, I'm sorry that you paid a very heavy price for being a scientist, for following the scientific method.
A heavy price. No, I'm free. I wouldn't call it a heavy price. And in retrospect, it was the good thing to do back in the time.
Yeah.
It was just like, it was a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I believe that. And so here you are, this is your area of expertise. Vitamin D is something you've been researching even before COVID happened. Yeah. This is what, in a sense, you've been trained to do. You're a scientist. What and then there are all of these objections to you publishing this paper, which is again I have to point this out, it's been evaluated by your peers and they're like, this is a good paper and I think it needs to be published. And I know something about academia, it's very hard to get papers published in in good journals.
Yes.
There,
well,
there
it depends. If you're Peter Hotez, you can write whatever shit you want and get published. But if you are a scientist who's not corrupt, who isn't in the circles of all these editors, it's difficult to get stuff published.
And I want to come to that a little later about what's happening in academic science. Did your university at all tell you why they objected to your paper on vitamin E? Why did they? I believe they branded you a pseudoscientist. And
no, the university didn't. They didn't.
Okay.
They just told me. They didn't even tell me in a written form. They just told me on the phone, I'm too critical, and they prefer to have a scientist who's less critical, and that they got like a message from above, so probably the ministry, or I know, to not employ me any longer. So this is all they told me, but I didn't fight with any of these professors there. Actually, I was friends with them until I got sent.
Okay. I mean, were you tenured at this time? I don't know how it works in Europe, but were you a tenured professor at this point?
No, I wasn't. I still wasn't in the tenure track. I was planning to.
Okay.
It was the end of my first postdoc.
Okay.
So I did the postdoc, and I had the follow-up funding for then a position that would have been tenure or a second postdoc.
So did you push? I'm assuming that you may have pushed against the university or your these other scientists, saying that this is, you're a pseudoscientist and that this paper is not. Is just denying the existence of COVID-19. How did you react to it? Like, did you pursue?
I didn't. I just remained quiet. So I was just explaining internally that what this paper is about, and they read this paper and they agreed with my paper and they said it's fine and what I did is correct. The problem was when I called out Marion Koopmans, who was a co-author of this PCR protocol. She's the Dutch state virologist from the Netherlands, and the university is a Dutch university. So I was literally proving that Marion Koopmans was corrupt. All right. So I mean, and that was proof indirectly. I was saying the Dutch government is corrupt, because they were taking corrupt scientists. She was thrown out of some committee because she got money from the Chinese Communist Party. So she obviously was very corrupt, and I still consider her corrupt. She belongs to court, all right? But the university, of course, back then was like, okay, you cannot attack the Dutch state virologist. We are in a dangerous situation here, blah, 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 blah. So this was the situation I was facing. And when they sent me, they didn't fire me. They just didn't prolong the contract, even though I gave them new money. So it's something that has never happened before in academia. I've never heard of this, especially as I got the money, as I wrote this application in my free time. I wasn't even writing it for the university. I was writing it for myself. And I put the university as a partner on this paper, on this application. So I eventually got a job at, I think this project contained of 6 partners that I sourced. So eventually got other universities want to take me as well. Everybody was like, oh, no. But one in Norway was willing to take me. So they took me 1 week after I got sent off Twitter for posting my vitamin D study again and for asking the Bill Gates Foundation why they invested in BioNTech in September 2019. And I referred to their website, and this was COVID disinformation. I got kicked off Twitter in June 2021. And end of June 2021, I started working for the Norwegian Research Institute, which went fine until early 2023, which is this year.
And what happened with the Norwegian Research Institute?
Well, I got my Twitter account back.
Okay.
You can imagine. I had 1.5 years time to just collect statements. I was just collecting news statements, journalist statements, scientist statements on Twitter. I was just like lurking on a small account, and I was just making screenshots. I
Okay.
actually was planning to write a book about this at some
Mm.
point, with all the contradictions. I mean, super interesting what they said before and after. Some people don't even change their minds. And then I got my Twitter account back, and I had the chance to ask these people why they have been saying this in 2021, which is what I did. Of course, you must have here your Twitter account's back. I was like, yay, I will
Yeah.
confront these people. And I wasn't even, I wasn't saying like, hey, asshole, look what you said. And I was just like, how do you, do you still see it like that, or would you consider yourself corrupt, taking the fact that you get money from this and this organization, you say this and that? So just like very simple questions every critical journalist would ask. But I think 2 weeks after I asked these people these questions, I got fired in Norway
Okay.
for here we go. The official reason is Simon Goddek exceeded his freedom of expression on Twitter.
Amazing.
Amazing. And there's no country that's not a dictatorship where you can come, where you can come up with this reason. It's not a reason.
What is exceeding freedom of expression? What
Well,
does that even mean?
they came up with an example. They said like, I kind of said that someone could be corrupt. So I was suggesting corruption, but I was asking this person whether the person was corrupt. David Fishman from Canada, who said like, yeah, he's one of the worst ever. He belongs to court. But he was saying like, oh, the vaccine's like 100% effective. Everybody just says otherwise. So, just like extremely lies. He said like, we need because the vaccine is so effective and so safe, we need, what do you say? We need to vaccinate by force, or we need to make it obligatory. Whatever he said, and these were statements that were never based by there's never a consensus about this. I mean, there wasn't even proof for that. And I was just asking him like, hey, on a level from 1 till 10, how corrupt are you? Stuff like that. And and they said, and I know they got many emails. So my former boss was even telling me just orally that he received many complaints every day about me. And the company in general, Research Institute is a private research institute, also funded by the government. So I think it's a 50-50 thing. And they received complaints. But until I got fired, I was like holding myself back a lot to just be factual, etc. But it didn't help. So they fired me. And then my lawyer said like, oh, this was unlawful. They fired me again, was unlawful again. And they fired me the third time. And now I dragged them to court. So, that's the situation, and they're extremely woke. Everybody double vax boosted. Everybody gets tested literally every day. It's very woke. They even don't allow Russians to work for them, because what Russia said, like, Russia is attacking Ukraine. We're not like letting Russians work for us anymore. So it's like, the Russians, the unvaccinated. It's like, totally extremely woke. At least I lost my job for being on Twitter again. So for exceeding my freedom of expression. I think it's funny. Yeah. I think it's funny. I mean, like, there's no way they can win the lawsuit. I cannot imagine they could. No.
Well, I'm glad that you're able to laugh at this. Speaking about your lawsuit, I saw a few days ago, Elon Musk is offering financial support to those who've been fired for expressing a view on Twitter by their employer. Is this something that you're going to take up? Are you going to take Elon on his offer?
Well, so I woke up and I got a mail from my lawyer. Simon, look at this tweet from Elon. I was like, cool. So I was writing a post and I'm just explaining what happened to me. It went viral. I think it had several million views and I think like 40,000 likes. And I was asking Elon Musk, hey, whom do I have to contact? Because my case is like, it's like the case, because I got fired after he took over, I got fired this year for literally doing nothing wrong, for just exceeding my right to freedom of expression. So I was asking him and I was asking others, like, whom do I contact? Because they will take up every single person who got fired, and they will even go after the board of the companies. But I didn't get any reply. I have no clue. Maybe I have to write an email. I have my lawyer to write an email to Twitter, because I think this would be a very interesting thing, because in Norway, just to sue a company, it's like 20 till 30,000 US dollars. I don't have that. So I was now selling my car in order to pay my lawyer, and up till now. I'm having some campaign, some funding. This GoFundMe, just like a better website, because GoFundMe is Vogue as well. So I have also this campaign running. I think I already raised $4,000, which will cover at least a couple of percent, I think 20% or a bit less. So yeah, so car plus this, I could maybe cover now 50-60%. But what Twitter is offering, of course, is tempting, because I mean, I'm using the platform. I'm getting them so much traffic. I'm getting them so much money via the ads, which I'm generating, and like I'm losing my job for using this platform, which is unfortunate. But of course, it's not their fault. I could just like refrain from using it, but then I would silence myself, and it's also no solution.
Yeah, back to the science and dissent in within science. How do you differentiate between genuine scientific disagreements and instances where scientists are deliberately manipulating outcomes to match their beliefs? You referred to this PCR test earlier, and I'm thinking about that. Like, how do you differentiate between the two?
Well, I don't trust academia anymore at all, because the system is rigged up to wherever. So, for example, let's look at Peter Hotez. I mean, he is my favorite example. He was writing several publications for The Lancet, for Nature, for the highest ranked journals in the world, where he was saying like, we need to treat unvaccinated people, or we need to treat those who oppose the vaccine like terrorists. We need a counter-terrorist group to attack them like military style. They are evil Russian spies, stuff like that. He even brings in Russia every time he writes. It's so unscientific, and he gets published. The question is why? There needs to be some high degree of corruption in the background. There's no other solution than that. I don't have any explanation. So if I sent a top-notch paper to Nature or to The Lancet, they wouldn't accept it, because who is this dude? Peter Hotez gets everything accepted. He's friends with all the editors. So the problem is that these, I call them pseudoscientists, because they have other interests that probably get money from other organizations. You can see that his hospital gets money from the Bill Gates Foundation. You don't know how they communicate in the background. Maybe they say, if you publish this and that, we give your institution some money. I have no clue how it works in the background, but I can tell you, it's not science. It's not science if the media only invite Dr. Liana Wen, Dr. Eric Ding, and Peter Hotez, and maybe Topol to spread their pseudoscientific nonsense, which is dangerous to people, and they silence those who actually just try to help people. And then there are people like Hotez who make so much money, and also the other players for sure make lots of money. And they say, okay, their media says they're legitimate, but like people who lose everything, like me and others, they say like, oh, they're grifters. Oh, they don't support science. The science is settled. I mean, like, you just have to. I mean, there's no logic behind it. If you lose everything, there's a reason you lose everything. Either you're just like stupid, or they just want to silence you. And everybody has to make their own mind. Everybody has to think rationally. I mean, common sense has been lost, and just like use your common sense and think about what's happening, and then you can make up your own mind.
Are there? I mean, I know you're, disappointed at the way, things have evolved within the scientific community. But are there any specific fields or disciplines within science where you believe this kind of bias and manipulation, or corruption, as you call it, of study outcomes are more prevalent? And why do you think that is?
Social science.
Okay.
Gender science.
Yeah, gender science. Yeah,
what should I say? It's I mean, no, I don't want to use ad hominem here. So, but I have a very strong opinion about gender science and most fields of social science. It's sorry.
Yeah.
No, the methodology. It starts with the methodology they're using. It's most likely junk to the highest degree, but they get funded. So you have to look who's trying to support it. It's Agenda 2030. also, the European Union has a program. I think it was called Horizon 2020. I think it's called Horizon Horizon Europe, and they're supporting a lot of these fields. Gender equality, gender equality. In the field of gender equality, they put all this stuff like transitions, and you can apply for it and you get the money. And then of course these people who apply for this aren't based people. They're woke people who publish woke stuff in woke journals, and then it becomes reality. So yeah, the money is put there. The money isn't put to the right place, unfortunately.
So do you think if you remove, I mean, you need funding to pursue research. So how do you propose getting around this? I mean, unfortunately, we can't get away from the funding, right?
And the funders already determine what they want to hear. So if you apply for Horizon Europe, it already states what they want to hear and what they want you to talk about. So they already determine the path you need to take within your study proposal. So these scientists, they just want to confirm what the people who fund you want to hear, and it's a confirmation bias, more or less. And then this becomes reality, and then this attracts more people, and it's impossible. For example, let's say climate. Okay, it's impossible for being critical and publishing in climate critical publications, because none of all these journals would accept it, because as soon as a journal accepts this, they would get cancelled. So we're talking about a scientific community which is homogeneous and doesn't allow other opinions, and that's not science.
Yeah. You spoke earlier about how you have these experts going on TV. They're like the experts on COVID-19 or gender science or whatnot. To what extent do you think media coverage influence the behavior of scientists in terms of pursuing scientific outcomes in their studies?
I don't know, but I can tell you that you also have the same bias for journalists. Journalists know if they don't report what is on the agenda, they will most likely lose their job, or they cannot get a better position within wherever they're working. So journalists do what they're told to be done. And of course, if you're a journalist and you want to start working, for example, for some state media in Europe, you need to be left-wing and woke, otherwise they will not take you. And I mean, there's, at least for Germany, there was a survey among volunteers who worked for the state media, and which party they would vote for, and it was more than 90% the left-wing woke eco party. So, when you're in a team of 20 people, when you're the only one who's conservative, or let's say base or critical, you can't get your position out to the general public. So that's where it's starting. And of course, the journalists then invite those who also share the woke positions and who say what they want to hear and what they support. Of course, they take the Peter Hotesses, or they take Liana Wen's. Most of the journalists don't know that they are most likely installed or most likely put into this position, And I think there are only a few people who more or less select who's going to be on the news. Or I don't know how it works, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it's just that I'm just thinking, you're a scientist, you're an expert, you've been invited to a talk show, and you keep getting invited, and then you become a celebrity, from
that's how it works.
From sitting in your lab all day, you're now on TV, and and you have, you become a celeb overnight. And then I wonder to what extent, a scientist in that position is able to separate the publicity and the celebrity status that they've now recently acquired from actually doing real science and being objective in what they're doing.
That's the problem.
And yeah, that is a problem. And Simon, yeah, I know you have to run, but I want to ask
No,
you about.
it's fine. We can talk a bit, a couple of minutes longer. I just have to run errands before having be on the next interview. But
Yeah,
what I love to do about so my role right now, exactly what you said is correct.
yeah.
But I love to look at prior 2020 and post 2020. So I take the same scientists and I check what did they say about these topics prior 2020 and post 2020. And it's most likely all these famous science celebrities prior 2020 said exactly the opposite of what they're stating now regarding vaccines for respiratory viruses, regarding masks, regarding how to cope with the pandemic, regarding everything you probably see. They stated the exact opposite. And that's what I like to expose. And this actually shows that something is wrong because I haven't seen any fact-checking agency who has done what I'm doing to check what did your heroes say prior 2020. And they take every meme I post. I post memes sometimes. I love posting memes on Twitter because memes like take humor in order to show that something is going wrong. So they take my memes and they fact check memes. Like, what the heck? Who fact checks memes? They do this. Yahoo is doing this, and news agencies are doing this. CNN was fact checking my memes, but they don't fact check their own experts. They don't fact check their own fact checkers, and that's a big problem, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's quite extraordinary. I don't even think that the fact checkers in most cases are even have any kind of a science background, to be honest with you.
No.
It's unreal. Like it's a real bizarre world where the people fact checking scientists themselves have no basis in science.
Yep.
And I wonder what, I've spoken to a bunch of scientists and they're just like, here's this intern in a fact-checking organization. I have a PhD and I worked for like 20 years on the subject, and they're telling me, how to do my job essentially. So it's really quite something. I want to ask you about what you're doing right now. I know you moved to Brazil recently, and you have a startup. Can you tell us a bit about your startup?
Oh yeah, shortly. I can do that. So I moved to Brazil after I lost my first job, and because no money in Europe is a problem, right? So I moved here. Easy life. My partner's Brazilian, and it's a beautiful country to live in, at least for a while, I think. And so yeah, after I got fired the second time, so I already had like an idea they will fire me. So I was like working on a plan B. I was like, hey, everybody has always been accusing me of selling vitamin D. I was like, fuck them, I'm gonna do that. So it's just like having I was just starting a small startup, Sunfluencer, like influencers like Sunfluencer. And okay. I'm selling vitamin D, and the next product will be omega-3s. I just want a turnkey solution. You know that you don't have to take like 15 pills per day. You just take 2 vitamin Ds and 2 omega-3s. And then actually that gives you actually all you need, the average person. So I just want to make life easier for people. I want to give them, I want to tackle their deficiencies. Main deficiencies are magnesium, vitamin D, and if you take it with K2, and to some degree zinc, but just like 20%, and omega-3s is a very, very high deficiency. Just want to give people a solution for having better health, for being more independent from the government. It's just like my small startup I'm trying to grow. So yeah, it was a reaction on what happened, because I was like, okay, I've been silenced 3 times. The third thing I cannot talk about because there's some legal things going on, but 3 times being silenced, and I was like, okay, if I go into academia again, I will be silenced again. So I needed to be independent in order to say what I'm saying now publicly on Twitter or in shows like yours. Otherwise, I would have to silence myself again. This is not a solution in these times.
Yeah, sounds extremely stifling. But Simon, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insights. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while, but obviously I couldn't track you down because you were not on Twitter, or you were suspended from Twitter. But it's good to have you back on Twitter and sharing your views and your insights, and calling out the BS wherever you see it. And really appreciate you being on the show, Simon, and good luck with your lawsuit. And yeah, and I hope that you'll be back on the show soon
Hopefully.
to talk about all of the progress that you've made.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Take care.
Top.